Okay, well, several months ago, prior to the onset of the coronavirus, I had a series of dreams that I thought were pertinent to members of my family. But since the onset of the coronavirus, several of those elements of those dreams have seemed to be significant to what is transpiring globally. I'm going to try and recall and cite those dreams as best as possible. I did not write them out as I sometimes do when I have dreams or visions, or record them prior to today because they were very terrifying and horrifying in their nature, and it was very difficult for me to even allow myself to reflect upon those things. So I'm going to, at this time, try to go back and state as much detail as I can about those things, because I do see some of those elements as being prophetic in nature regarding the things that are transpiring today. So I'm going to break this video into three sections, parts 1, 2, and 3. For those specific dreams, I will not go into interpretation of those dreams until after I've just simply gone through and specified the details of those events. Okay, this is part 1, or the first dream. It transpired or began in a locale that appeared to be similar to an airport terminal. There were scores of seats around this facility, inside of this facility. It was filled with people. They were very diverse individuals, different nationalities, different ages, different cultures of people. It was filled to capacity. Around the perimeters of this terminal, this excessively large, extremely large seating facility, there were windows on every side. You could see out for miles on every side, and it just seemed to be flat land out each side. There weren't any standing structures or buildings visible as you looked out of the windows. Along all of the walls were large monitors, and the monitors were displaying different areas of the world, and there were different news stories being broadcast through at different spaces, different locations within this terminal. Everybody seemed to be pretty tense. What was transpiring was that there was some entity, some beast, some creatures, some devourer that was going about and was killing people, excessive numbers of people. And the monitors would show different regions, different areas where it had been, and would broadcast and forecast of where it was headed next. And I remember that a monitor that was directly in front of me, a large overhead monitor that was directly in front of me, caught an image of this beast, or whatever it can be called. It was in appearance similar to a T-Rex, but its nose, the face of it was much longer. Its arms were longer than what we would see. A T-Rex had longer arms. It had the hands of a man in that it had 5 fingers. It didn't have web fingers, and its fingers were claw-like. They had 5 digits, 5 separate fingers, and it could maneuver and manipulate its hand freely. And on the monitor that was directly in front of me, I saw this beast, this destroyer, break off a piece of a building, and it was this monster, this beast, was several stories tall, and it just broke off a piece of a building like somebody would stick their hand into a cake and just break off a piece of the cake. And in its hand was the corner of the building, and inside of the building was a man hanging on for dear life. Had he released, he would have just plummeted to his death. That's how tall the this beast, this creature, this destroyer was that it was stories high, and the man would have just plummeted to its death. And I saw the thing bringing that piece of building with that person clinging onto life to its mouth, and it was about to devour it. And I closed my eyes and turned away, and I couldn't watch it. And people were just terrified, petrified, as they watched all of these scenes unfold, where it had been and where it had killed and where it had destroyed and where it had just consumed people. And one person after another, there started to be some murmuring and some grumbling among the people in this place, and they were saying things like, "Where's the light?" And it's not bright enough in here. It's not light enough in here. And they were complaining about the temperature and the light. And I remember thinking, well, we're inside. We're safe from whatever is out there. And it's daylight. At least it was daylight coming inside. It wasn't like excessively light, bright or very bright light, but there was light from all of the open windows that were surrounding the perimeters of the edifice. And so there was some murmuring and some complaining, and some people who were not satisfied, and other people were just quiet and just watching all of the things that were unfolding. Then I heard a voice from behind me that said that they were going to close this facility. They were going to close the building because their people were tired, and their people had been working for hours and hours, and we were going to have to leave. And night was approaching. It wasn't night yet, but night was approaching. And I remember thinking, they're going to send us out, and they're going to remove us from what we believe to be a safe place and just send us out. And it's something, it's out there. It could be out there even now. And so there were thousands of us. And so we left the building. And as we came out of the building, I remember that the pavement outside of the building was like concrete, and it looked like it had been freshly power washed. It didn't have any oil stains or any spots or anything. It was just light, and the sunlight that was remaining was shining on it, and it looked very white and clean. The building was to my left, and outside the building, it looked like sea of glass. It was just blue and just shiny, the building that we had just exited on the side of us. And it was from the outside, it looked blue. From the inside, it was clear. When you looked out, there was no color to the windows from our inside view out, but outside it was just blue, and you couldn't see in from the outside. As far as I could see ahead of us was just this pavement, and then just beyond that, it looked like a freeway way down to the end of this large pavement that we were walking on, all these thousands of people. So in the far distance, we could see what looked like it may have been a freeway, and then you could see there's like one little car, another little car, and so yeah, it looks like a freeway. Maybe there's a city on the other side of the freeway. Maybe there's a town. Maybe there are buildings. Maybe there's someplace else we can find some refuge, some safety is what we were thinking. And so we started to head that way. To our right was a large esplanade, and it was acres wide and acres long, or miles wide and miles long. It didn't go as far as the freeway, but it was very, very far ahead, going in the same direction as the freeway, and very, very wide. And all the way to the extreme end of this esplanade that was to our right as we walked towards the freeway was a grove of trees. Okay, so this esplanade was all green. It was all green. It looked like it might have been freshly cut. It had a concrete barrier all the way around it, and it was oval. The esplanade was oval in nature. There were no buildings on it, no structures or anything of that kind. It was just like an open field, and at the far end of it was a cluster of trees. And then night started to approach, and it started to get darker, and then the trees just looked like shadows. You couldn't really make out each individual tree. You could just see the form of something against the black of night. And I remember looking at those trees and looking at the tops of them specifically, and thinking that thing, that destroyer, that thing that had been traveling and moving from one area to another was there. We just sensed it. I sensed its presence, and we were still walking towards the freeway, and I kept looking at the trees, and there wasn't a breeze, but I saw the tops of the trees moving, and I perceived that thing was in the trees. And somehow I knew that it had morphed. It no longer looked like this T-Rex thing, but it had morphed. And it had a plume in the back that when it was upright, the plume lay flat. But when it bent its head over, the plume would rise up. The plume would stand up. And so it was kind of crouched behind the trees, and it had its head down, and the plume that was on the back of its neck raised up, and it was kind of mixing in with the trees, and it had just kind of camouflaged itself behind the trees while we were walking. And I just kept looking at it, and then it raised itself up, and it revealed itself, exposed itself, and it had morphed into something that had the form of a man. It looked like a man in terms of it had arms and legs and hands and feet and everything, but it still had that same hideous face as the first thing that looked like a T-Rex with long arms and fingers. Now it had the form of a man. It was fully formed and developed. It was very muscular in its build, big chest muscles and arm muscles, biceps and triceps were bulging. In abdominal area, the 6-pack or 8-pack, and it was just massive. The muscle tone of it was massive, but the entire body was covered with like a scale, like armor. It was like armor. The whole body was armor. And when it raised up, everybody just started running, and people were screaming. And it could have very easily just come across the esplanade at us, but for reasons unknown, it went around the perimeters, and it was running around the perimeter to come back around to us. And every one of its steps, and each step was like miles. This thing was enormous. One single step was just like miles. And every time its foot hit the ground, the earth shook. It was just like boom, 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 boom. And it could run so fast that you could hear the wind like so. In between each step, it was like and it was just and the earth was just shaking with each of its steps, and it was moving miles at a time. And here we were running it, and if we by comparison, we wouldn't even reach the top of its foot if it was standing beside us. And so it was traversing this long esplanade, coming around it, and the next thing we knew, it was on the same side of the esplanade as us. And out of nowhere, a massive trench appeared, and the trench was miles long, heading towards the direction of that freeway where we were running. And the people just dived into the trench. There were no rocks to cover us. There were no hedges. People were just lying side by side in this trench, and this thing was standing over it. It didn't have at first any clothing or apparel or tunic or loincloth of anything on it. Then all of a sudden it had a belt around its waist and a sheath, and it pulled a sword out of its sheath, and it was about to take its sword and to scoop up all the people out of the trench. And then out of nowhere, just two individuals just came, and they approached it, and they started to war with it. They came around its angles, and they started to war with it, and it morphed again. And it could change its appearance and its size, and it became the size of a man, and it started to war with them. And then they were able to lure it away from the people in the trench. And when it lured it away from the people in the trench, everybody jumped up and everybody ran. And I had two sisters. One sister was lying in the trench, and she was just shaking. And she was calling out to God, and she was speaking in a prayer language, but she was literally paralyzed with fear, and she couldn't move, and she was still in the trench, and her body was just stiff, and her legs were crossed, and she was shaking violently like this, just shaking. So, oh God, she's shaking and speaking another language. And one of my sisters was shaking her and telling her that you must run, you must run, you must get up, you must try, you must go, you must run, or you're going to cause somebody else to die while somebody's trying to save you, while somebody's trying to rescue you. You've got to move, or you're going to be responsible for somebody else dying. And another person, somebody I don't know, somebody from another ethnicity was there. One other person out of all the thousands of people was there with her, trying to pull my sister out of the trench. And it was like I was having almost an out-of-body experience. I was there and I was looking, but I wasn't actually present. And then all of a sudden I was present, and I ran to the trench where they were and somehow helped get my sister out of the trench. And then all of a sudden a building just appeared out of nowhere, the kind of building that looks like the little utility buildings in like a power center, or like a electrical plant or something like that. One of those little utility buildings, and it just appeared out of nowhere. And it was orange, I believe, and it was just about the size of like a 15 by 15 or 20 by 20 room. It was a small thing, and everybody was gone, even my sister that was trying to help the other one out of the ditch. And I was shaking my sister. I had her behind that shed, and I was saying, get control of yourself, get control of yourself. If you don't move, if you don't run, if you don't try, somebody's gonna die. You have to fight the fear. You have to get control of yourself. And while I was yelling at her to get control of herself, I sensed the thing was there, and it was standing on the other side of that little shed, and it had morphed again. And it was that tall creature again, that thing that was taller than the tree, with the scaled arm body and the horrid face with the long teeth. And I sensed that it was just about to snatch us up, and we were about to be consumed. And I guess in my sleep I was crying out or something, and somebody heard me. So a member of my family called my name, and I awakened. But that was at the very moment when we were just about to be consumed. Okay, this is the second dream. In the second dream, where thousands of people were running, and the earth was like beach area, in color. The ground there was no grass at all, no grass. And it was about the color of the sands of the sea, a lighter taupish, like the sands of the beach. But it wasn't boggy sand. It wasn't something that could just bog you down, or soft or pillowy that just kind of cushion yourself. So it was kind of hard, but you could tell it was sand. But it was kind of like packed. And there were these like holes, like craters, that probably maybe 5-6 feet in diameter, maybe a little bit larger, something kind of shallow little craters everywhere. Every few feet there were craters, and in each and every crater there were partially consumed remains. And you couldn't tell from the remains whether human remains or animal remains, because they were so badly mutilated. But I knew they were human remains because there was cloth in every crater, clothing I assume, but cloth, some material in every crater with these partially eaten bodies. And also in each crate was what looked like murky water. And so there were just hordes of people just running and screaming, and something was after us, and I couldn't see it. And it was coming behind us, and it was coming, and everybody was screaming and running around these craters and trying to get back. And I heard this voice. The voice just kept saying, carnage, carnage, carnage. And it was so much death. It was just death everywhere. And as I was running with people behind me and people in front of me and people beside me, people running around the craters and running for dear life. Someone was ahead of me. As I said, there were several people running ahead of me. And then there was some trees, but they were dead. They were dead. They had no green, no leaves, no greenery to them. They were to my right, just like that esplanade had those trees to the right. But these trees were now the trees were withered and the trees were dead. And this thing just came out of the trees, and it looked like it's some kind of it looked similar to a dinosaur, but it wasn't tall like that T-Rex looking thing. And it had a long face, it had a long tail, it had long arms, it had long jagged teeth. The nose of it was long, and when it opened its mouth, it had long teeth. And it just swooped out right in front of me, and it grabbed somebody up in its mouth, and it had them up in its mouth and it just began to devour them just like that right in front of me. And I couldn't stop. I ran right behind it. Somebody else ran right in front of it, and people were just running around it while it just ate this person, just snatched them up and just started to consume them. And we were just running and screaming and running and screaming. And then far in the distance, there were more trees. These trees didn't have barks. It looks like they had been peeled, and it looked like the bark had been peeled off, and they were kind of light taupe. The trunk of it was like light taupe, and they did have leaves, and the boughs of the tree did have leaves. And I remember people just started running towards the trees and started trying to run up in the trees, but the crazy thing about it was this thing was as tall as the trees, and running into the trees wouldn't provide us anywhere to hide, but it was the only thing standing. And so we were running and running up the trees, and I could feel it coming right upon the tree where I was, and I woke up. Okay, so now this is the third dream, and the third dream was weeks after, so it's like a couple of weeks. The second dream came like a couple of weeks after the first, and then the third dream was a few weeks after that dream. Okay, in the third dream, I was in my father's house. When I have dreams, little interpretation here, when I have dreams about my natural father's house, it typically relates to the church, like the church, global church, or just the body of Christ. It represents usually the church of Jesus Christ. And so I dreamed that I was at my father's house. And my father, my natural father, is deceased. So my father was lying on a sofa. This sofa was very, very flat. It didn't look like a regular sofa. It was very, very flat. It was like an oversized throne kind of thing. And he was lying on it. And his eyes were closed. But I sensed that he was not asleep. He was lying on his back with his arms at his side. And he was just quiet. And the thing was in the dream. This monster destroyer thing, demon, whatever it was, this entity that was in the other dreams and in a different form was in this dream, and it was in a different form. This time it looked reptilian. It was two shaded, like a green and a taupe kind of thing, and it had hands like a man. It stood upright. It stood upright on two legs, and it wasn't tall. It was like not even as tall as my knees. And I was trying to beat this thing with a shoe. And the shoe that I was trying to beat it with was like a house shoe, a house slipper that was lined with sheepskin. And I was trying to beat it, and I was beating it and beating it and beating it and beating it, beating it. And I couldn't really hurt it. I was beating and beating and beating with all of my strength and all of my energy. And finally, it went from standing to lying on its belly, and I was beating it, and I was beating it and beating it. And then when I looked at it again, it was lying on its it was lying on its back. So, but before I started to beat it, somebody called me and somebody asked me to come and kill it. Somebody asked me to come and kill it. And in my home, my natural home, there are no males in my home. And so in my natural home, if there's a lizard, there's a snake or anything like that, I'm the person that has to go and address it. If something's broken or something needs to be fixed, I'm the person that needs to fix it. And so there's no male head in my household, so I have to take that charge and do that. So somebody called me and told me to come. And so I came, and so all I had was my shoe. And I was beating it and beating and beating it until I quote unquote stunned it. And my father was there, and he was just lying there. And I said to my father, how long are you going to lie there and sleep? And I said, can't you see I need help? And I was yelling at him, and I was saying, can't you see we need help? My shoe is not strong enough. My shoe is not heavy enough. It's not heavy enough. I can't destroy it, and I need your shoe. And I was telling my father, I need your shoe. I need you to give me your shoe. And so I just kept calling out to him and telling him that I couldn't do it. My shoe wasn't strong enough. I needed his shoe. And then I saw him smile. And he began to sit up, and I woke up. And immediately I understood that quite clearly. I did not represent me. I represented a church that doesn't have the strength that this church should have. I said my shoe didn't have enough weight. Biblically, spiritually, weight is the glory of God. It's the strength of God. It's the power of God. And I, being female in the natural sense, I represent that which is weaker, because God created man first and he made him the head and he gave them authority. And here I was being called to an assignment, and I wasn't the head. I wasn't the authoritative figure. So it clearly indicated to me that the church is not operating with the authority that it should, is not operating with the power that it has. It has some authority, but it doesn't have the authority that God ordained for the church to have. And when I said, I need your shoe, that means I need your authority. Because God told Satan in the garden that he would wound mankind's heel and man would bruise his head. We're talking about authority. And so I didn't have the authority. The church didn't have the authority. I don't know if the Father got up and destroyed it. The Father represents the Father God. At some point in time, with our crying, with our confession that this thing is bigger than us, or it's resilient, we can't destroy it, we don't have the power, we can immobilize it to some extent through our efforts, through our prayer, through our fasting, whatever it is that we're doing. We can affect it, we can impact it, but we can't utterly annihilate it, and we need the power of God for that. So I don't know if God actually is going to destroy the thing. I don't know if it was destroyed or not. But going back to the other two dreams, there was a lot of references to the trees in those dreams. And I was just in the house one day, and I just heard this bronchioles. This word is bronchioles, and then the dream came back. And so our lungs consist of bronchioles. And so that's when I started to kind of put the pieces together. We were sitting in this terminal-like thing, looking at this devourer thing in different places of the earth, in different places, killing and destroying and anticipating that it was going to come, coronavirus. What does it impact? Largely the pulmonary system, the lungs, causes the fibrosis to develop in the lungs. And so this thing was hiding in the trees. It's something, I don't know its origin, and I'm not going to even try to speculate on its origin. There's a lot of talk and controversy about where it came from and all those kinds of things. And then the being in the trench, it just reminded me of the genocide of the Jews, all the people lying in the trench, just with, and the thing was there and poised and ready to kill, and poised and ready to kill. But we had a measure of grace, you know. We had a safe place. It was out there, and we didn't know where it was, and it was out there, and it still was lurking, and it's still out there as of today, whatever today's date is. It's out there. And the second dream, that's the second phase. We had some semblance of safety, and the thing is still out there. It hasn't dissipated, hasn't been destroyed. And the craters with the bodies, that's people that are in all probability going to succumb to this thing that's rampantly killing and rampantly at its own whims, destroying just this. And the word carnage, that's all I could hear. That's the only word that was spoken in dream 2, was carnage. The consequences of being sent out of that safe place. I think the safe place that we were was not just our staying at home, but I think the safe place that we were was in God's protection, and we didn't know it. We as a nation, we've complained and we've grumbled against God. We haven't been faithful to God, and we've grumbled against him. We didn't know about his grace. We weren't appreciative of his grace as a nation, his protection as a nation. I think that's what the murmurers represent, us being in a safe place and not being appreciative of it, and then being sent out to confront something that we couldn't see, something we didn't know was there, something that we became vulnerable to. And I think that's what dream 2 was us being sent out because we weren't appreciative of the place of safety that we were in, which was in God. So I believe that there's going to be at least 3 phases, and then I think it's going to subside to some extent, because I think that the carnage is going to drive the church to pray and fast with sincerity. We've been doing that, praying and fasting, but with some real intense sincerity, and seeking God more and acknowledging we are not what God would have us to be. We are not where he would have us. We're not operating with the authority and the power that we should be operating as the living church, as God's church, as the church of Jesus Christ. And I think when we come to terms with our failings and our faults and our weakness, we're going to strike a chord with God. And he's going to say, that's what I've been waiting for. That's what I've been waiting to hear. Because he says, if my people who are called by my name would humble themselves and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, I would hear from heaven and heal the land. God needs his people to get to a certain place. And when we get to a certain place of confession of our feelings and our faults and where we are and our need for him and our being out of order, then God will come and God will bring order. So, as a body of Christ in the church, our goal and our charge and our call is to pray and seek God, get in order, get in line with God, let God be at the helm, and seek and really pursue his authority in us so that we can be what he wants, and that God can bring healing to our land.